Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world. So welcome back to another edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton, and I'm going to be your host and guide for the next 20 minutes while we delve into everything teamwork again. And today's episode, I really wanted to just bust through some myths about teamwork, because often what we think happens in teams isn't what happens. And I think today more than ever, cracking the code on team effectiveness is really crucial to organizational success. And you know that I've often talked about the superpower of teams and how companies really aren't leveraging this as effectively as they could. Because at most companies, teams generate value as a primary unit of performance. But teams are now more autonomous and empowered than in the old traditional hierarchical organizational structures. So teams need to be this mix of dynamic and collaborative at the same time, and they need to work across the whole ecosystem. Many of you will know I've been harping on for a long time about what business can learn from nature, because nature does understand the power of this ecosystem and how everything needs to work together. But yet many teams that I see and work with, even if the team can work collaboratively together, teams within the organization aren't working collaboratively. And so what we get are these individual silos of teams working effectively. But actually what we're missing is such a trick, because if all the teams worked effectively together, we would definitely get the result that 1 and 1 equals 3, more of the sum of the parts. And there's a lot of myths, I think, that exist around team chemistry and what happens. So I thought today what we would do was unpack 3 of these different myths, because I think today team effectiveness is less an art and indeed more of a science. So the first myth that I'd like to debunk today is that teams should ideally be stacked with top talent in every role to achieve maximum effectiveness. Well, I think we all know the reality is effective teams focus on individual and collective skills and behaviors that matter most. And every role needs to be fit for purpose talent, not necessarily top talent. So we could have some of the best people in our organization on a team, but if that's not the right mix of people on that team, then it's not going to be an effective team. And we've spoken on many an episode about the GC index and how that helps you identify team members' energy for impact. And when we combine the right team members together, in the words of Jim Collins, get the right people in the right seats on the right bus, then we get exponential performance. One of the examples was with the Olympic Games, when we saw that the US Olympic 100-meter relay team, they had some amazing individuals within that team. But as we know, they dropped the baton in the final and they didn't win. And why was that? Well, it was almost like the individuals were too focused on their own individual performance and not the collective performance of the team. And actually, they also hadn't practiced as much as other teams. And that's why they didn't win the race. They were a group of individuals, each brilliant, but not collectively brilliant. So I think that that's really important for us to recognize, that individual talent alone cannot substitute for cohesive teamwork. McKinsey have done quite a lot of work recently on teamwork, and what they have identified here is that there's a growing body of scientific evidence behind what creates an effective team. And I think in many organizations, we still look at teamwork in terms of the time and financial investment that happens. And these are quite surface issues. And really, we need to look at what are the root causes that create an effective team. And the McKinsey research identified 17 behaviors, which they've called health drivers, which impact team performance. And they've grouped these into 4 core areas. Configuration, which is all about the team having clear roles and a mix of perspectives. Alignment, team members are clear on the team's direction and are committed to it, importantly, committed to it. Execution, how well the team carries out its work. And finally, renewal, the team's working environment is set up for long-term sustainability. So 4 areas: configuration, alignment, execution, renewal. And these form a really holistic view of what's going on in a team and how the team members can work effectively together. Importantly, not just in the short term, but also in the longer term. And in fact, their research identified that these health drivers collectively explained between 69 and 76% of the differences between low and high performing teams when it comes to 3 outcomes: efficiency, results, and innovation. So this is really, really significant. These 17 health indicators or health drivers, and how they really can absolutely transform team performance. So let me just summarize for you a little bit about how the drivers go together, just so that you've got a little bit of sense about how the 17 work. So configuration, made up of 3 drivers, and configuration is all about, do we have role clarity and the necessary mix of internal and external perspectives? So of course, one of the drivers is having diverse perspectives. And we've spoken a lot on this podcast about the importance of having diversity of thought within our teams. The second driver under configuration is external orientation. And this is all about building networks outside of the core team. And we know how important relationships are for building effective teams. And the more relationships you've got within people outside the team, the better things work and the more you can get done. And in my experience, the more influence and impact you can have within the organization. And the third driver under configuration is role definition, which is all about understanding the expectations and responsibilities that everyone has within the team. So that's configuration. The second area is about alignment. And this is all about, are we committed to the team and are we clear on its purpose and goals? And again, 3 drivers here. The first being commitment. Are people actually committed to the team and prioritize the team's success over their individual success? Goals. Are individuals and team goals, are they challenging enough and are they aligned with the priorities of the organization? And the third driver here is about purpose. Are the team clear on the purpose and articulate what the team is meant to accomplish? Because actually many times when I'm working with teams, people aren't really clear on what they're trying to achieve. And when we don't have that clarity of direction, then that's going to cause some challenges. And then execution. Under execution, we've got 5 drivers. And execution is, are we effectively carrying out our day-to-day work? So first driver of execution is collaboration. And so have we agreed ways to collaborate so that we can work effectively? The second one is communication. Are we communicating sufficiently and effectively enough? And are we using the right communication method? 3 is all about decision-making here, having clear roles in the decision-making process so that we can make quick, fast decisions and learn from poor decision-making. Number 4 is all about feedback, giving honest feedback and inviting people to give you unsolicited feedback as well and receiving that kind of coaching support around it. And number 5 is all about meeting expectations, which is focusing on actionable items and involving the right people at the right time to follow through on the next steps. And the final area we want to look at is renewal. Do we create the right working environment and enact practices for long-term learning and performance? And there are 6 areas under. So the first one being belonging. Do people actually feel that they're part of the team and can be themselves? And belonging actually is a really, really important part within business, because team members want to feel part of something. They want to feel like they're making a contribution and they belong. So belonging, something we don't talk about really enough in business, but really, really important for individual team motivation. Conflict management. Are we able to address conflicts effectively? I often talk about healthy conflict within the workplace. The more that we can engage in debate and conversation and people can express their ideas and opinions, then that's what's going to help us move things forward. And if we go back to 2 or 3 episodes ago when we were talking about Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, remember commitment is the 3rd lever in there. So you've got trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and then you get to results. The 3rd area under renewal is innovative thinking. So again, this relates a little bit back to the diversity piece that we were talking about earlier on, is seeking out opposing perspectives and having open discussions that can encourage change and out-of-the-box thinking. The 4th area under renewal is creating psychological safety so that people feel comfortable making mistakes, failing forward, trying things out without fear of consequences, and constructively disagreeing with one another and proactively inviting each other's input. Then the 5th area under renewal is recognition. Are we celebrating enough? Celebration is something that generally I find my clients don't do very well. We're not very good at celebrating successes. So we need to hold one another accountable to consistent performance standards and celebrate when we do it well. Not just focus on the things that don't go to plan, but always think about this positive aspect of looking at what went well. And finally, trust. Do we feel that we can trust one another, give each other the space to get work done, and trust each other's good judgment? So as I said, these 17 drivers within these 4 categories of configuration, alignment, execution, and renewal, can explain anywhere between 69 and 76% of the difference between high and low performing teams. So this is really something that we need to focus on within the organization. One of the other things the research showed is that areas such as trust and communication are obviously really, really vital to create high-performing teams. But areas that came out as being really important that people didn't usually think about were things like innovative thinking and decision-making. Also very, very important to create high-performing teams. So how can these drivers play out within teams? So we've spoken a lot about trust, and there's 2 ways that trust can be understood. That's cognitive trust, believing that people are competent, reliable, and have a sense of integrity, and effective trust, which is all about the interpersonal bonds built on a sense of care and connection. And the McKinsey research showed that teams that scored above average on trust were 3.3 times more efficient and 5.1 times more likely to produce results compared to those with below average trust. And in terms of decision making, good decision making is really particularly important in driving innovation. And again, the McKinsey research showed that teams that scored above average on decision making were 2.8 times more innovative than below average teams. So decision making, trust, and obviously communication, as we would know, are really, really important to make our teams more effective. So the second myth that we want to bust today is that teams already know what they need to work on. The reality, though, is teams are often unaware of the most important gaps they have, and they can actually have blind spots, leading them to prioritize the wrong thing. So teams can actually believe something is a strength when actually it might be a weakness, or they choose to work on something they already do pretty well. And what the McKinsey research showed is that most teams actually are pretty poor at knowing what their blind spots are. And so there's typically a gap between what teams believe is important and what drives them to perform and achieve their objectives. So I think that that's really important, that we recognize that teams sometimes really don't know it all, and that actually having this external perspective can really help highlight areas where the team can excel even more. And this is why, again, I'm so passionate about working with diverse teams, and for teams to not stay too rigid, but to have this flexibility for different people to come and join the team, because each new person that comes into the team brings a new perspective, which opens up new opportunities and opens up that invitation for us to innovate more. And then the third myth that we want to talk about today is that there's a best practice playbook for team effectiveness that every team should adopt, so that there's one plan that means you'll be an effective team. But unfortunately, folks, the reality is there's no one size that fits all. And team success is really down to how they work together, so their interdependence in terms of the outcomes, and their task interdependence as well. So outcome interdependence is the extent to which team members' individual outcomes and successes depend on that of the other team members as a whole. And of course, when outcome independence is high, then everyone needs to work together to create success. And therefore, we're more likely to create a successful team because everyone has a vested interest in getting everything right and doing the right thing at the right time. And task interdependence is the extent to which team members interact to achieve their goal. So again, high task interdependence means that team members have got to work closely to make sure they get all the inputs and cooperate with each other. And the McKinsey research showed that only 46% of teams agreed on both types of characteristics. So there was a real mismatch here going on within organizations. So this is why it's so important that teams need to frequently coordinate their efforts together and not work in silos, because when we work in silos, we're never going to start creating that ecosystem that we really want, that really drives and accelerates team performance more than ever before. So there are 3 types of team archetypes that I really wanted to share with you today, which I think, again, are quite illuminating, because we tend to think about a team and we think of all teams the same. And I'd like to suggest to you 3 types of archetypes of teams. So if you think of something a bit like a cycling team, for example, the cyclists, they work together and they draft each other in to support each other. But each individual cyclist is typically running their own race and makes their own individual decisions. So they only have sort of moderate outcome interdependence, a moderate task interdependence, because the team's success can be influenced by individual performance, but the collective effort, such as drafting and strategic positioning, plays a significant role. So in the archetype of a kind of what we call cycling team, the key drivers of performance are trust, communication, innovation, and decision-making. So let's just think of an example of a kind of cycling team in the workplace. So this might be a business's recruiting team, because each team member focuses on different aspects of the hiring process. You know, recruiters source team members and maybe screen candidates. Hiring managers maybe conduct the interviews and make the decisions. Administrative staff handle logistics. But they've all got to coordinate everything together to give a smooth candidate experience. And while each role can perform effectively on its own and have individual success, it's never going to be as effective if everyone cooperates together and makes everything work seamlessly. So the second archetype of a team is a relay team. And again, this has moderate outcome interdependence, because the overall performance of a relay team is the combined effort of each runner's individual performance in their own segment. So, you know, when we think about that US 100-meter relay team, everyone had to be successful on their own leg. However, within a relay team, there is high task interdependence because each task member has to complete their segment and smoothly hand over the baton to the next runner. So that really requires a lot of precision timing and coordination. So a lot of practice needed to get that handover right. So in addition to trust, commitment, innovative thinking, and decision making, the relay team archetype also needs a lot of commitment, goals, and recognition alignment. So what's an example of a relay team in business? That might be something like a software development team using an agile methodology. Because each developer works on a different feature, but everyone must collaborate effectively and frequently together. And so this ensures everyone works seamlessly, even though the individual contributions can vary quite considerably. And as a result of this, what this can mean is that a feature created by one developer that could potentially have a bug in it doesn't necessarily impact the overall performance, because if everything else is running smoothly, you might not notice it. And then the third type of archetype of a team is a rowing team, which has high outcome interdependence because the success of the race depends entirely on the coordinated efforts of the rowers working in perfect harmony. And again, at the Olympics, we saw this over the summer with the British rowing teams and how successful they were at all pulling together. I remember watching one race, I think it was the women's race, where we literally won by about 6 inches. And just to see the way that they all dug deep and totally aligned and became synergistic just to get the boat over the line to win. And this rowing team archetype also has high task interdependence because everyone must be synchronized together, right? The strokes have to be precisely aligned to maintain that balance and speed. So the attributes that drive performance within the rower archetype team is trust, communication, innovative thinking, decision-making, belonging, and role definition. And what's an example of that in business? Well, think maybe something like a surgical team in a hospital. It's got loads of members, it's got the surgeons, it's got the nurses, it's got the anaesthetists, all the other medical personnel, and everyone's got to work together closely. And the success of the surgery relies heavily on each team member performing their duties flawlessly and in perfect coordination. And I think what's interesting is that these higher performing teams in this rower archetype really emphasize this need for belonging and role definition more so than lower performing teams of this type. And I think this is because they're highly interdependent on tasks and outcomes of each other. And everyone really has a clarity about who's responsible for each aspect of the work. And it's this feeling part of a close-knit team that helps them succeed as an integrated whole. So some really interesting thoughts there, I hope you find today, on myths around teamwork, and particularly around these 17 health drivers that make teams effective, and also the 3 different archetypes of different teams. So my invitation for you today would be to go away and think about, well, what type of team archetypes do you have within your business? Are they mainly all cycling type archetypes, or relay type, or rowing type archetypes? And then look at the 17 health drivers and just figure out which ones do you need to focus on and pay more attention to within your teams. Because teams are, and I truly believe, just such a competitive superpower. We're all sitting on this amazing resource within our business that we can really use that can help propel our business to the next level. But it has to be harnessed effectively. We need to harness the energy of our people to work collaboratively together, to work synergistically together, and to really understand that business is an ecosystem where everything one team does impacts everyone else. So how can everyone get aligned and get on the same page and pull together? Because if it does, it can create exceptional results. So I wish you an amazing week, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Have an amazing time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favourite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?